Tonight at 10, the transition is already underway, and France's new president will take office in just 6 days' time. Side by side, the president-elect and the outgoing head of state at a formal ceremony at the Arc de Triomphe, commemorating the end of the Second World War in Europe. As France enjoyed a bank holiday, we talked to parents in a Parisian suburb about their hopes for the Macron presidency.
It will be hard for him because I'm sure that lots of people vote for him yesterday, but it's almost against Marine Le Pen.
Also on the programme tonight, no backing down. A Conservative government would stick to its target of cutting net migration to the tens of thousands, says Theresa May.
So are you worried about Ofcom at all?
No.
Hello?
You should be worried about BBC as well.
An investigation into Rupert Murdoch's bid to take full control of Sky. Will it be engulfed by allegations of sexual harassment at Fox News? Record numbers of migrants have tried to reach Europe so far this year. We have a special report on the rescue efforts in the Mediterranean.
These women look really exhausted. They're coming on one by one. One of the women I've seen has got a little child with her.
And the rivers running dry in the UK before summer has even begun, prompting fears of a drought.
And coming up in Sports Day on BBC News, Chelsea are heading towards the title, but will it cost Middlesbrough their Premier League status? We'll have all the news from Stamford Bridge.
Good evening from Paris, where in 6 days' time, Emmanuel Macron will be installed as president after his decisive win in yesterday's contest against Marine Le Pen. He's already started work on forming a government, and he's taken plenty of calls from world leaders, including Theresa May, offering their congratulations. Well, the official result was confirmed earlier today. The centrist, M. Macron, won with 66.1% of the vote, with Marine Le Pen of the Front National on 33.9%. The turnout was 74%, and by the way, that's the lowest in nearly half a century. It means that some 11.5 million people didn't cast a vote. Well, the day brought a highly visible statement that the transfer of power is underway when the president-elect and the outgoing head of state appeared side by side at a ceremony here at the Arc de Triomphe to commemorate the end of the Second World War in Europe 72 years ago today. Mr. Macron declared that the time had come again to fight the forces of division. Our Europe editor, Katja Adler, reports now on the day's events.
It's been a day of reflection in France, paying tribute to the World War II fallen, taking stock of fresh challenges ahead. France's brand new and youngest ever president-elect here at VE Day commemorations. A little hesitant, a little unsure, taking his cue from the outgoing head of state. It will be a steep learning curve. Emmanuel Macron is pretty new to politics, but the crowds here were hopeful.
It's very difficult to put some reforms in France, and having such a guy that is really young will help to change things.
We hope he keeps his promises. Politicians normally don't. We want a France for the poor as well as the rich.
Tonight, Emmanuel Macron's fans and foes will be watching this with interest. A fly-on-the-wall documentary filmed during his presidential campaign. Intriguing because France is about to be presided over by a politician known for his charm, but whose person, party and policies are pretty much unexplored. What we do know is that he's a Europhile, a passionate one, and leading Europeans are cock-a-hoop, in understated tones.
Emmanuel Macron carries the hopes of millions in France and across Europe. He led a courageous pro-European campaign and stands for openness to the world.
Emmanuel Macron has raised high expectations, promising many things to many people. To dramatically reform France, caring for the fragile while boosting business, and to change the European Union, and to be very tough on Brexit. But he doesn't have his own government or MPs in Parliament. So is he flexing muscles he doesn't yet have? France's president-elect has made Brexit threats aplenty. Damp and desperate in Calais today. After Brexit, Mr. Macron has vowed to tear up an agreement where France prevents thousands of migrants making their way to Dover each year. He's talked too of luring banks and businesses from the City of London this side of the Channel. But domestic discontent, not Brexit, will be Mr. Macron's main focus. It's what drew 1 in 3 voters to Marine Le Pen, his far-right presidential rival. She's popular here in the pool halls of Calais, where unemployed youngsters while frustrated days away. In struggling towns like this, there's little faith in elite-educated metropolitan Emmanuel Macron.
Young people vote for Marine Le Pen because they can't find any job. The unemployment rate is sky high here in Calais, unfortunately.
There are no jobs and too many migrants, Daniel told us. Almost 60% of Calais voted Marine Le Pen. Maybe next time the whole country will be ready. This evening in Paris, there were small but heated demonstrations against Emmanuel Macron, some organised by the trade unions. As a centrist politician, he faces opposition left and right, and only weeks away from crucial parliamentary elections. Katia Adler, BBC News, Paris.
Well, despite Mr. Macron's compelling margin of victory, there is nonetheless a real sense, even within the Macron team, that his win was finally secured by people whose main motivation was to vote against Marine Le Pen, rather than a positive desire to see Mr. Macron in power at the Élysée Palace. So to find out more, earlier today I went to one of the Parisian suburbs to meet some parents there at a junior football tournament in that part of the city. It's the annual bank holiday football tournament in this eastern suburb of Paris, a typically diverse community on the outskirts of the capital, and where the reaction on the terraces to yesterday's election seems to be more relief than enthusiasm.
I'm sure that lots of people vote for him yesterday, but it's almost against Marine Le Pen. So, and he's young and he doesn't have any past experience, so it might be difficult for him, but I think he can do it.
It is a complex picture, even in a mixed community like this one. One of the coaches, who left his ballot paper blank, by the way, told me that the issue of immigration and social integration raised by Le Pen had to be taken seriously.
It is a big problem, even for established immigrants like me. Foreigners coming to France these days just aren't able to integrate. 11 million voters went for Le Pen. That doesn't mean that all of them are racist.
And it is abundantly clear that it was fear of a Le Pen presidency more than anything else that drove many people to vote for a political novice as president.
I'm very happy it wasn't Le Pen, but Macron wasn't exactly my choice. As most people will tell you, this election was about voting against Le Pen, not for Macron.
There had been talk on the left of sitting it out, of refusing to take part, and while some certainly did, it didn't change the dynamics of the 2017 race.
I have some friends from the left, from the right, and everybody in Paris vote for the same man. The first time that when I have lunch with people, everybody agree to vote for that man.
And in this Parisian suburb, another element of consensus among the parents. If Macron gets it wrong, Le Pen will be back in 5 years' time, probably with a very different result. Just a flavour of some of the voices earlier today in eastern Paris. And with me is Katia Adler, our Europe editor. Katia, we've seen the euphoria in the Macron team, that's understandable. Let's talk about the reality of the challenges that he now faces.
Well, look, what Macron faces is the fact that this was a very divisive presidential campaign, and those divisions don't disappear overnight because the election is over. And you pointed out yourself, even amongst those who voted for Emmanuel Macron, many did just so to stop his far-right rival. So now he has to somehow bring France behind him, and the clock is ticking. He's got those all-important parliamentary elections coming up. He needs a majority in Parliament. He needs a credible government to pass those reforms that he's promised everybody. If he doesn't get the majority and has to build a coalition, will he jump into bed with one of those traditional parties that he's distanced himself from? Then he risks losing those reformer credentials before he's even started.
He's clearly going to be a powerful voice in the European Union, and some challenges there ahead, not least the Brexit process. It's a sharp focus on that. Is he likely to make a big impact on that process?
Well, he's promised to be a hardliner, but that's France. France is always a bit of a tricky negotiator now when it comes to Brexit. So if you like, that's a bit of status quo, at least for the British government. I think where you can see the positive side for Emmanuel Macron when it comes to Brexit is that the UK needs EU unity to have a Brexit deal and to make a future trade deal. Emmanuel Macron will put EU unity first. Marine Le Pen, as president, would have caused chaos in the EU. She wanted out of the euro, possibly out of the EU. An EU in disarray would mean no deal for Britain. So that's positive. Also, of course, for 2 years, he was France's Minister of the Economy. He won't say no to a good trade deal that's advantageous for the UK, for France, and of course the rest of the EU.
Katja, once again, thanks very much. Katja Adler there, our Europe editor here in Paris. That's all from the French capital tonight. In just 6 days' time then, France will have a new president in power at a critical moment, as Katja was saying, for the future of this country and, of course, for the wider European Union. There's more detail, more analysis from Katja and her colleagues on the BBC News website, bbc.co.uk/news. It's all there for you. Follow the links. But now, let's go back to Sophie for the day's other stories.
Hugh, thank you. Here, Theresa May has confirmed that the Conservatives will stick to their target of reducing net migration to below 100,000 a year if they win the election. That's despite repeatedly missing that pledge since it was first introduced in 2010. Meanwhile, UKIP says it wants to have zero net migration over the next 5 years. Here's our political editor, Laura Kunsberg. Her report contains some flash photography.
They couldn't leap to their feet fast enough, gathered to hear their leader in Marginal Harrow in North London, who joked she's after the same scale of support as the new French leader, who scored nearly 70% of the vote.
We need to ensure we've got an equally strong mandate and an equally strong negotiating position.
But it was Team Theresa who year after year missed their target for net immigration, which has been 3 times higher than the limit of 100,000.
What is the point of sticking to an immigration target that many of your colleagues think is unworkable? Some people even think it's pointless. And when you were in charge as Home Secretary, it's a target that has been missed for 6 years.
We do want to bring net migration down to sustainable levels. We believe that is the tens of thousands. And of course, once we leave the European Union, we will have the opportunity to ensure that we have control of our borders here in the UK.
So the target stays. But note, you didn't hear a deadline.
3 cabinet ministers here. Why should voters believe the Prime Minister will meet the immigration target this time? She didn't when she was Home Secretary for 6 years.
She's made it very clear that once we leave the European Union, things change.
She will see policies through.
But her record as Home Secretary was she missed the target for 6 years. She missed it for 6 years as Home Secretary.
I think you look at her record as Home Secretary, you will find that she achieved great things.
It wouldn't be a British campaign without a banana somewhere.
Strong and stable bananas.
Whatever point this voter in Leamington Spa was trying to make, Labour doesn't put a number on its plans for immigration, but say the target just doesn't work.
Theresa May made that promise in 2010 and made the same promise in 2015 and didn't get anywhere near it on any occasion at all. Obviously, our manifesto will set out our policy when that's produced.
UKIP has its own new idea for tighter control. 1 in, 1 out.
UKIP will go into this election with a policy of balanced migration, which means zero net immigration over the next 5-year period.
Scotland's First Minister, pulling pints in Perth, wants power over immigration in Edinburgh.
Having a Tory
target that is not practical, will not be met, but is driven by ideology, will harm our economy. And it's another reason why it's important that we have MPs in this election standing up for Scotland's interests.
Picking up the pace. I have got my running kit with me.
Close by, the Lib Dems were after votes in St Andrews. The target was Tory policy during the coalition, and the Lib Dems are unimpressed today.
Don't set a silly artificial target that you know you will break just because it'll please a couple of newspapers.
Yet the target will stay. Easier to hit in theory after Brexit, but no explanation from the Tories so far on what they'll do in practice.
We are in rather a no man's land, the time before the main political parties are ready with their final manifestos. It's only then we'll see exactly what promises they're willing to make in black and white. But it's absolutely clear, however unworkable, however discredited, Theresa May is adamant she will stick to her immigration target.
But how she plans to get there, we're still in the dark. Laura Kunzberg, BBC News, Harrow.
The most recent figures show that net migration stood at just over 270,000 last year. Many employers here say they rely on workers from the EU and elsewhere. Some business leaders have expressed concern about the government's plans to significantly cut the numbers and say migration should be set according to economic need rather than arbitrary targets. Our business editor Simon Jack has more.
A growing economy needs a growing number of workers, and the EU has been a plentiful supply of them for businesses like this food producer in Northern Ireland.
The Northern Ireland agri-food industry is massively reliant on EU nationals to make up their workforce. Some 48% of those full-time workers in Northern Ireland agri-food industry are EU nationals. That number exacerbates when you take into account the casual agricultural labour that comes in seasonally into Northern Ireland. So the stakes are very high for the agri-food industry in relation to labour.
That is precisely why some business groups don't like this target. In its very own manifesto, the CBI said that with unemployment near record lows, this target is unhelpful and should be scrapped.
The risk of a single blunt number is that it doesn't enable the needs of the economy to be reflected in the people we bring in. So we know we have great ambitions for the country. We know we want to build 1 million homes. We want to improve the NHS. We want to improve our road and rail system. These are all ambitions that need people.
Net migration measures the difference between the number of people arriving in the UK and the number of people leaving. According to the latest figures, 273,000 more people arrived here than left. Now, of that number, 165,000 more came from the EU than went the other way, while the number arriving from outside the EU was very nearly the same at 164,000. So, even if you reduced net migration from the EU to zero, that 100,000 target would still be way off. In fact, that target was last hit in 1997. Some say that proves that if we've done it before, we can do it again.
For decades, the UK economy performed perfectly well with net migration levels of about 60,000, for example, in the 1980s and 1990s. So there's no reason why we can't do that again. I think it's actually good for the economy in the long run to cut migration to low-skilled jobs, because at the moment it produces a low-skill, low-productivity, low-wage economy.
Businesses across many sectors have been reassured they will be able to get the workers they need. But can you reassure everyone while still cutting net migration by 2/3? That's one reason perhaps why there is no delivery date on a promise first made 2 elections ago. There's only one thing it seems worse than missing an immigration target, and that's not having one at all. Simon Jack, BBC News.
Labour has promised to abolish parking charges at NHS hospitals in England if it wins the election. The party says the policy would cost around £162 million, which it would meet by raising the tax on private health insurance premiums from 12% to 20%. The BBC has announced details of its general election debate programmes. There will be 2 question time specials in which party leaders will face audience questions. The first will involve Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn. There will also be a 7-way debate with senior party figures and interviews with the main party leaders. And you can find more information on each of the party's policies along with detailed analysis of what they mean in practice. That's on our special section of our website. Visit bbc.co.uk/reality check. Now, record numbers of migrants have already tried to reach Europe from North Africa this year. More than 7,000 have been rescued from the Mediterranean over the last few days alone. The Italian Coast Guard says as many as 200 may have drowned. Most of them have set off from Libya, attempting the treacherous crossing in search of a new life in Europe. Rita Chakrabarti has spent the last week on a rescue ship and she joins us now live from southern Italy. Rita.
Sophie, thank you. The sea is calm now that spring has come, and that means that the migrant boats have started again, and in a big way. Over Easter weekend, more than 8,000 people were rescued from the Mediterranean, and this weekend, as you mentioned there, the numbers have been very similar. Now, this aid ship that I'm on rescued over 500 people on its own. The charity Save the Children said it was their biggest such operation so far. Those migrant people are now safe on the shore, but the bigger questions surrounding this sort of migration and the criminal activity that sustains it continue. 7 uneventful days at sea with a rescue mission, and then suddenly this.
We have 2 rubber boats, possibly also 1 wooden boat. Team, please prepare on deck for rescue.
A scene, said the crew, like never before. First 2, then 3, then, as we were spotted, more and yet more boatloads of people veering towards us to rescue and to safety. These women look really exhausted. They're coming on one by one. One of the women I've seen has got a little child with her. This toddler named Blessing is one of the tiniest travellers. Her mother Joy, who's Nigerian, says she risked the journey because she couldn't return to her home country. She'd been working in Libya, where she was repeatedly kidnapped and ransomed for money.
I go to markets. When I entered the taxi on my way, they stopped the taxi, dragged me inside another car. They go and lock me inside room. They told me to control my husband to bring money.
I asked her what she hoped for from the future.
If I see what I will do, because everything is telling me I have baby.
Blessing is happily ignorant of her mother's grief and oblivious to the peril that she's just faced. Still they come. Goodness knows how many people were panned into that rubber dinghy there. They're all processed now, checked. This man clearly in pain. The vast majority on board are men of working age, from West and East Africa and also from Asia. There are many factors driving them, but the turmoil in Libya is key. These scars, Imran told me, were inflicted on him in Bangladesh, which is where he's from. He says he was targeted by the local mafia and so left for Libya to work as a cook. But he went months unpaid and was beaten if he asked for his wage. He told me he took the rubber boat because Libya was dangerous. He had a chance of life if he left. Libya was intolerable. He couldn't do it anymore. Last year broke records for the number of migrants making the crossing, and this year looks set to top that. Italy has borne the weight of housing and caring for them, but opinion is hardening, with claims that these rescue missions are a taxi service for migrants, and even that the aid agencies are colluding with Libyan people smugglers to bring the migrants to Europe.
Our sole mission is to save the lives of people, and especially children, who are escaping violence, persecution and extreme poverty. We have no contact whatsoever with people smugglers.
Earlier in the week, a body was spotted. The sea is a graveyard too. The search will go on. This crossing from Libya has become an established route run by ruthless criminals who care little whether their desperate passengers will see another day. Rita Chakrabarti, BBC News.
A 35-year-old man has been charged following a dog attack on a 2-year-old girl in Liverpool yesterday. The girl suffered injuries to her head and body when several dogs got into the garden where she was playing in Toxteth. She's in a serious but stable condition in hospital. Andrew McGowan from Toxteth has been charged in relation to the incident. The telecoms regulator Ofcom has said it is very concerned about the rising cost of telephone calls to directory inquiry services. The 4 largest providers charge at least £5.50 for a call, and one charges nearly £9. Campaigners are worried elderly people will be caught out by the high prices. Ofcom says it's planning to review the market. A senior official who worked for President Obama has said she warned the Trump administration that its original choice of Michael Flynn as National Security Advisor was open to Russian blackmail. Giving evidence to a Senate committee, the former Deputy Attorney General, Sally Yates, said Mr. Flynn had lied about his contact with the Russian ambassador. He resigned after less than a month. The Halifax Bank says house prices in the UK fell by 0.2% between February and April, the first quarterly drop for more than 4 years. The lender says household finances are being squeezed by rising prices in the shops, which is weakening the demand for homes. The Fox News presenter Bill O'Reilly has been one of the most famous in America for years, but he stepped down last month after being accused of sexual harassment by a number of women. Now, one of them has flown to London to try to block Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox, from taking full control of Sky. Today, she met with the media regulator Ofcom, which is investigating whether Murdoch's company, 21st Century Fox, would be fit and proper to take full control of Sky. Here's our media editor, Amol Rajan.
Caution, you are about to enter the no spin zone.
This anchor, Bill O'Reilly, and the network's former boss are at the centre of sexual and racial harassment allegations that have led to their departure from Fox News. Also gone is the co-president. So arguably the 3 most important men at Fox are out. This huge corporate scandal has shaken it to the core.
For the threats we face today.
Over 2 decades, a mixture of conspiracy, aggression and nationalism has made Rupert Murdoch's channel the most watched cable news network in America. For the Murdochs, the timing couldn't be worse. They are currently trying to take full control of the British broadcaster Sky through an acquisition by 21st Century Fox. They declined an interview request, so I said hello to the boss as he left work in Manhattan.
BBC, are you worried about Ofcom at all? No. Hello? You should be worried about BBC itself. I think that'd be a problem. That's what too. Getting record ratings and record. Fox News are getting record ratings. Yeah. And so I'm not worried at all. And you don't think Ofcom are going to consider what's happening at Fox News? Will it enter Nothing's their happening at considerations? Fox News. Nothing. Okay. You lost 3 of your top people. That's something, isn't it? There's a sexual and racial harassment allegations. Not the 3rd person at all. Nothing against him. And the other 2 are quite separate. So goodbye.
The harassment scandal at Fox News is the talk of Manhattan, and it might only just be beginning. Federal investigators are looking at whether or not Fox concealed payments to alleged victims from investors. And the worry for Rupert Murdoch and his family is that the echoes of the phone hacking scandal are getting louder by the day. Lawyer Douglas Wigdall is representing over 20 of the alleged victims of harassment. He wrote to Ofcom with details of the claims and is meeting with them on Thursday to provide background on the allegations against the likes of O'Reilly.
They let him stay for over a decade because he was making Fox a lot of money. So I'm not confident that they terminated Bill O'Reilly and gave him $20 million on the way out for the right reasons, just as I'm not confident that the other moves that they've made have been done because they do want to create change. I think they're doing these things because A, they've lost advertisers, and B, they want to appease Ofcom.
I experienced sexual harassment as a job applicant at Fox News Channel by an employee named Mr. Bill O'Reilly.
Radio host Wendy Walsh, seen here with the lawyer Lisa Bloom, filed a complaint against Mr. O'Reilly by phone. Only in America will they do it this way. Mr. O'Reilly and former Fox News boss Roger Ailes deny all the allegations against them. The 2 women flew from Los Angeles to London today specifically to explain to Ofcom why, in their view, the Murdochs are not fit and proper to own Sky outright.
I hope that the good people of the UK know how openly 21st Century Fox has ignored the laws protecting women's rights and the rights of people of color. That's not right. I know that women's rights are valued here, and I would hope that everybody would stand up for those rights.
21st Century Fox, parent to Fox News, says it has taken prompt and decisive action to improve its workplace, overhauling top management and appointing women to several senior positions.
So why is this happening, Dr. Walsh?
With multiple investigations now underway, including a federal probe, Mr. Murdoch's claim that nothing is going on at Fox News sounds like what some Fox contributors would call fake news. Amol Rajan,
BBC News.
And finally, this photograph was taken at the weekend in Cumbria, a river that has already run dry. It's a rare sight at this time of year, but it's because large parts of the UK simply haven't had much rain over the winter. This Met Office map shows the rain across the UK last month. The darkest areas are those that have had less than a third of the usual rainfall. Danny Savage reports now from the Yorkshire Dales.
Across large parts of Britain at the moment, there's a lack of water. A dry spring, preceded by low winter rainfall, has left many riverbeds exposed. This wouldn't be an unusual widespread sight in late summer, but it's rare in May.
Well, when I had a ride round up there on Friday, and you get a lot of small ponds and wet holes that are usually there all year round. They're all dried out, they're absolutely bone dry, there's nothing at all in the bottom of them.
Stuart Hurd has farmed here all his life. The riverbed drying up isn't unheard of, but he's noticed the hillside springs aren't right.
I can tell that it's been a lot drier because we've actually noticing sheep that actually come down to the parts of the river that are where the water is still running. You're noticing sheep standing on the riverbank drinking, whereas ordinarily they would be spread about up on these fells and drinking out of little springs and streams and things like that, which suggests that there isn't as much water up there as what there has been in other times.
Southern England has seen the driest conditions, with just over half the average rainfall since last July. The water company Affinity says people must do their bit to avoid restrictions later in the year. And these pictures were taken in northern England over the last few days, showing rivers many miles apart in a similar condition. But Yorkshire Water says there shouldn't be widespread alarm.
I think nationally it's been very dry. Up in Yorkshire, I think it's been a dry winter, probably the driest in the last 6 years. But we have seen recharge, sort of every other month we've seen some rainfall. But in the last 6 weeks we have just seen it dry.
A few dry months doesn't make a drought though. It may be bone dry in some of the headwaters of these river catchments, but we're a long way from a water crisis.
A few miles down the valley, the wharf looks a lot more healthy, and reservoir levels are holding up too. A prolonged dry spell may change things, but it would have to be for months. Danny Savage, BBC News, Upper Wharfdale in North Yorkshire.
That is almost it from us. Newsnight is about to begin over on BBC Two in a few moments. Evan is in Paris.
Paris is the centre of world attention today. That's how they like it. And we're here looking at how politics is changing. Are there lessons for Britain and the West? From the rise of a 39-year-old former banker to the President of France. Join me now on BBC Two.
Meanwhile, here on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Good night.